Dusty's quiet ranch. The sun, a burnished disk in the boundless azure, beat down as Dusty Rivers headed out to survey his spread. Miniature cyclones of dust spiraled across the baked earth, like earthbound dervishes. Ghost, his sway-backed Appaloosa, ambled along with a weary patience that mirrored Dusty's own. His cattle, Herefords mingling with black Angus, munched contentedly, their soft bellows a familiar and welcome counterpoint to the stillness. Dusty scanned the herd, his leathery face a roadmap of wrinkles carved by relentless weather and the passage of years. Dismounting, the saddle leather groaned a protest beneath him. He dropped to one knee, his gaze sweeping the ground for telltale signs of predators, a coyote's track or the paw print of a feral dog. Decades on the ranch had sharpened his senses, attuning him to every subtle shift in the land. A splintered fence rail, disturbed earth, the keening cry of a killdeer. He missed nothing. A lone calf, separated from its mother, bleated forlornly. With a tender nudge, Dusty steered it back to the herd, where its mother rushed to greet it. A small act, a simple kindness, yet coaxed a fleeting smile to Dusty's lips. He was the land's keeper, its protector, the shepherd of this isolated corner of the world. The daily grind of tending, repairing, and observing filled his hours, a constant, grounding rhythm. It was a lonesome existence, undeniably, but a life he understood, a life he needed. Since her passing, the ranch had become both his refuge and his cage. As twilight bled across the horizon, staining the sky with shades of apricot and lavender, Dusty turned Ghost towards home. The farmhouse, a humble, single-story dwelling with a generous porch, stood in silhouette against the vibrant canvas. Martha had always dreamt of adding a second story, a wraparound veranda where they could sit and watch the storms roll in. A promise he'd made, a promise yet unkept. He dismounted, leading Ghost to the barn. The air, now crisp, carried the mingled scents of cured hay and earthy manure. He fed and watered Ghost, murmuring quiet words to the animal, finding solace in their silent company. Animals asked no questions, offered no hollow comfort, made no mention of the gaping hole in his life. Inside, the house felt cloaked in silence, a heavy, suffocating blanket. Dusty lit a single kerosene lamp, its fragile flame painting the walls with elongated, swaying shadows. He heated a tin of stew on the stove, the metallic tang permeating the small kitchen. He ate alone, hunched over the table, the scrape of his spoon the only sound. The simple courtesy of setting the table had become an afterthought, along with many other comforts, long ago discarded. After he rinsed his plate, the splash of water amplifying the pervasive quiet. He drifted into the living room, the lamplight illuminating the time-faded floral patterns of the furniture. On the mantel, a silver frame held a capture moment, Martha, younger in the photograph, joy illuminating her face. Her eyes, the cerulean of a summer sky, danced with life. Standing beside him, her arm linked in his, they both grinned like carefree children. It was a relic from the county fair years gone by, before the insidious illness took root, before the light had dimmed in her eyes. Dusty picked up the photograph, his coarse fingers gently caressing the glass over her image. A tidal wave of grief crested within him, a persistent ache that never truly subsided. He longed for her laughter, the familiar melody of her humming in the kitchen, the simple comfort of her hand in his. He simply missed her. God, how he missed her. He sank into his threadbare armchair, the photograph a weight in his hand. He stared at Martha's likeness, consumed by memories. The ranch felt more vast, more empty than ever before, a sprawling, echoing testament to his solitude. He remembered the day they'd bought this land, their hearts overflowing with dreams and aspirations. They would build a life, a family, grow old together. He closed his eyes. The imprint of Martha's joyous smile burned into his consciousness. He yearned to hear her voice, just once more. He wished he could reach out and hold her hand. He wished. He opened his eyes, the silence broken only by the soft crackle of the lamp. Carefully, he replaced the photograph on the mantelpiece, his heart leaden with sorrow. Rising, he walked to the window, his gaze drawn to the inky blackness outside. The stars glittered in the heavens, distant and indifferent. He wondered what the dawn would bring. More of the same, most likely. More toil, more isolation, more lingering memories. He wondered if he would ever find a way to fill the void within him. He heavily doubted it. The wife lottery. The town square buzzed like a disturbed hive. The air, thick with the scent of frying onions and sawdust, vibrated with the calls of vendors hawking everything from patchwork quilts to slightly used farm equipment. Bales of hay served as makeshift seating, and children chased stray dogs through the crowd, their laughter a bright counterpoint to the murmur of adult conversation. The annual autumn auction was in full swing, a chaotic tapestry of commerce and community. Martha May, perched on a wobbly crate near the lemonade stand, fanned herself with a church bulletin, her eyes darting around, missing nothing. "Lord have mercy," she muttered to Beatrice next to her. "Look at that monstrosity Mabel Higgins is trying to pass off as a pie. Crust looks like shoe leather." Beatrice just tittered, eyes glued to a particularly handsome farmhand attempting to wrangle a stubborn goat. Then came the announcement. Jedediah, the auctioneer, a man whose voice could peel paint, boomed from the makeshift stage. "And now, folks, for the item some of you have been waiting for, the wife lottery." A ripple went through the crowd, a mixture of excited whistles, nervous coughs, and disapproving clucks. Martha May's eyes narrowed. "Wife lottery," she sniffed. More like desperation lottery. The concept was simple, or perhaps simply appalling, depending on your viewpoint. Unmarried women, with their family's consent, were entered into a drawing. The winner would be presented to the highest bidding bachelor, a wife sight unseen. Esmeralda Esme Flores stood at the edge of the square, near the cotton candy stand. The sugary scent did little to sweeten the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. She fiddled with the hem of her floral dress, the bright fabric a stark contrast to the dull ache in her heart. Esme loved the autumn auction, the music, the food, the sense of community, usually. But this year, the joy was tainted, poisoned by the heavy secrets she carried. Her family. They believed they were doing what was best. They spoke of opportunity, of a better life than the one she currently had, scrubbing floors at the diner and enduring the sideways glances and whispered comments about her size. Her mother, wiping floury hands on her apron, had said, "Esmeralda, Hijja, we only want you to be happy, to be taken care of." Her father, a stoic man of few words, had simply nodded, his eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored her own. "But Papa," Esme had protested, tears welling. "I don't want to be chosen like that, like a prize cow." Her older brother, Ricardo, had put a hand on her shoulder. "It's not like that, Esme. Think of it as a chance to find someone who appreciates you, appreciates her." The words echoed in her head, hollow and fragile. Did anyone truly appreciate Esme, the woman beneath the layers of flesh that seemed to define her in everyone else's eyes? She was warm, generous, full of laughter, a talented baker, and a loyal friend. But none of that seemed to matter when all people saw was her size. From her vantage point, she watched Jedediah pull a name from a wooden box. The suspense was a tangible thing, a suffocating blanket draped over the square. And the winner of the wife lottery is Esmeralda Flores. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a smattering of applause. Esme felt her blood run cold. Her legs threatened to buckle. She spotted her family near the pie stand, their faces a mixture of hope and apprehension. Martha May, predictably, was already whispering to Beatrice, her eyes gleaming with malicious glee. "Well, I never. Esmeralda Flores? Who in their right mind would bid on her?" Dusty Rivers stood near the back of the crowd, leaning against a weathered fence post. He hadn't intended to come to the auction, but the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith hammer had drawn him in, a familiar sound that soothed the ache in his bones. The wife lottery, though that was something he'd always avoided. Seemed disrespectful to Martha's memory, somehow. He watched as Esmeralda Flores was led to the stage, her face pale and drawn. He'd seen her around town, a quiet, unassuming woman who always had a kind word for everyone. He'd also seen the way people looked at her, the barely concealed disdain, the pitying glances. It made his gut clench. He knew what it was like to be an outsider, to be judged for something you couldn't control. He hadn't planned on bidding. He hadn't planned on anything beyond tending to his ranch and trying to navigate the long, empty days without Martha. But as he looked at Esmeralda, standing alone and vulnerable on that stage, something shifted inside him. A flicker of something. Pity? Maybe. But also something else. A spark of recognition. A sense of shared loneliness. Jedediah cleared his throat. "All right, gentlemen, let the bidding begin. We'll start us off with this lovely lady." Silence hung heavy in the air. The kind of silence that spoke volumes. A silence filled with unspoken judgments, with averted gazes, with the weight of societal expectations. Dusty took a deep breath. He hadn't felt this alive, this compelled in a long time. He pushed himself away from the fence post and stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. $50. Humiliation and a helping hand. Esmeralda stood on the platform, the rough-hewn wood digging into the soles of her thin-soled boots. The autumn sun, usually a welcome warmth, felt like a spotlight, magnifying every imagined flaw. Below, the crowd was a sea of faces, some curious, some indifferent, but too many cruel. Martha May, perched on an overturned crate with her arms crossed, cackled loud enough for Esmeralda to hear. "Well, bless her heart. Looks like Esme's going to be a permanent fixture at these wife lotteries." A ripple of laughter spread through the nearby onlookers, sharp and unkind. Esmeralda's cheeks burned, the blush hotter than any fever. She tried to focus on a distant point, the peak of the Obsidian Mountains against the crisp blue sky, but the whispers were relentless. Fragments of sentences drifted up, each one a tiny barb. Too plain, never marry her. More to love, I reckon. The auctioneer, a stout man with a booming voice and a too-slick smile, tried to rally the crowd. "Come on, folks, don't be shy. A fine woman, a hard worker," he trailed off, his voice losing its conviction as no one made a move. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the rustling of leaves and the occasional snicker. Esmeralda's carefully constructed facade of composure began to crumble. Her hands trembled, and she clenched them into fists at her sides. She swallowed hard, trying to dislodge the lump forming in her throat. It wasn't just the rejection, it was the public spectacle of it all. She felt like a wilting flower, displayed for sale, unwanted and undesirable. She chanced to glance at the crowd again. Faces blurred, the jeering whispers coalesced into a deafening roar in her ears. Her vision swam, the bright autumn colors of the market fading to a muted gray. Shame coiled in her stomach, a cold, constricting serpent. She wanted to disappear, to be swallowed by the earth, anything to escape the humiliation. Dusty Rivers stood near the back, leaning against a weathered post, his hat pulled low over his eyes. He hadn't intended to come to the auction. The whole ritual felt wrong, buying a wife like buying a mare at the stockyard. But Jed, his foreman, had insisted, claiming it was Dusty's civic duty to participate. Dusty suspected Jed just wanted to see him married again, tired of his boss's solitary existence. He'd watched the other women paraded before the crowd, their forced smiles and nervous glances. He felt a pang of sympathy for them, caught in this outdated tradition. Then Esmeralda took the stage. He'd seen her around town, at the general store, at church. He'd never paid her much mind, truthfully. But now, under the harsh glare of the auction, something about her vulnerability resonated with him. The way she held her shoulders, the downcast gaze, the almost imperceptible tremor in her hands. He saw not a plain woman, as the whisper suggested, but a lonely one. A kindred spirit, perhaps. The open cruelty of the crowd sickened him. The snide remarks, the outright laughter. It was a pack of wolves tearing at a wounded deer. He saw the color drain from Esmeralda's face, the flicker of despair in her eyes. Something inside him snapped. He hadn't planned on this. He certainly hadn't wanted this. But he couldn't stand by and watch her be devoured. He straightened, pushing himself away from the post. He wasn't sure what he was doing, only that he had to do something. He raised his hand, the gesture hesitant at first, then firm. $50, he called out, his voice rough with disuse and a sudden surge of what? Pity? Compassion? Something more? The auctioneer blinked, momentarily stunned. The crowd fell silent, the jeers dying in their throats. All eyes turned to Dusty, the unexpected bidder. Martha May's mouth hung open, a silent gasp escaping her lips. Esmeralda lifted her head, her eyes wide with disbelief. Dusty met her gaze, offering a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a silent promise, a reassurance that he wouldn't let them hurt her anymore. A new beginning. Sold. To Mr. Dusty Rivers. The auctioneer's gavel slammed down, the sound echoing through the stunned silence of the town square. Esmeralda's head swam. Dusty Rivers? The man who'd argued against the lottery just this morning? Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She risked a glance at him. He stood tall amidst the murmuring crowd, his face unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over her. Relief that the public scrutiny was over-battled with the terror of the unknown. What did this mean? Why had he done it? The crowd began to disperse, the initial shock giving way to gossip and speculation. Esmeralda was led away, not to the small, shared room above the bakery, but to a wagon parked near the edge of town. Dusty was already there, waiting. He offered her hand up. "Esmeralda," he said, his voice low and even. "Welcome." She took his hand, his grip firm and surprisingly gentle. As the wagon lurched forward, leaving the town behind, Esmeralda stared straight ahead, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The landscape blurred into a monotonous tapestry of sagebrush and sky. The rhythmic creaking of the wagon wheels was the only sound. The ranch house appeared on the horizon, a modest structure nestled against the foothills. It wasn't grand, but it looked solid, like it belonged in this harsh landscape. As they drew closer, Esmeralda noticed the neat rows of vegetables in the garden, a splash of vibrant green against the dusty brown. Dusty helped her down from the wagon. "Home," he said, a hint of something, weariness perhaps, in his voice. Esmeralda hesitated, her gaze sweeping over the ranch. A dog, a scruffy mutt with one ear perpetually bent, trotted up, wagging its tail tentatively. She knelt down, offering a tentative hand. The dog licked her fingers, its tail thumping against the ground. "That's Buster," Dusty said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "He's a good judge of character." He led her inside. The house was simple, clean, and smelled faintly of wood smoke and something else she couldn't quite place. Something warm and inviting. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, and sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. "I'll show you to your room," Dusty said, his voice breaking the silence. He picked up her small bag, the only possession she owned in the world. He led her down a short hallway to a small room at the end. It was sparsely furnished with a simple bed, a small wooden dresser, and a window overlooking the garden. But it was clean and it was private. "I hope it's to your liking," Dusty said, placing her bag on the bed. Esmeralda stepped into the room, running her hand over the worn quilt on the bed. It felt real, tangible, a haven. It's more than I expected," she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. Dusty stood in the doorway, his gaze steady. "I want to be clear, Esmeralda. I bid for you today because I saw your face. I saw how they were looking at you." He paused, searching for the right words. "I don't believe in forcing anyone into a life they don't want. This isn't a traditional arrangement. I need someone to help with the cooking and the housework. And, well, I thought you deserved a chance. A real chance." He stepped further into the room. "You'll have your own space, your own time. You'll be treated with respect. And if, after a time, you decide this isn't for you, I'll see to it you have safe passage back to town, or wherever you want to go." Esmeralda looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You mean that?" Dusty nodded. "Edo, I need help, Esmeralda, but not at the cost of your happiness." He paused, then added softly, "Besides, I could use someone to talk to. Buster's a good listener, but his conversational skills are somewhat lacking." A small smile touched Esmeralda's lips. I can cook," she said, her voice gaining a little strength. "And I'm a hard worker." "I'm sure you are," Dusty said, returning the smile. "Now, why don't you get settled in? Supper will be ready in a few hours." He turned to leave, then hesitated at the doorway. "Esmeralda," he said, turning back. "Thank you." And with that, he was gone, leaving Esmeralda alone in her new room, in her new life. She walked to the window and gazed out at the garden, at the vibrant green life pushing up through the dry earth. A new beginning? The thought flickered in her mind, a tiny spark of hope in the darkness. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The warmth of home. The crisp morning air nipped Esmeralda's skin as she exited the small cabin. The sky, a diluted cerulean, promised a sun that wouldn't deliver much heat. Dusty had pointed out the hen house and adjacent garden patch, explaining, "They're easy enough to care for, just need a bit of your time." The hens, a diverse flock of Rhode Island Reds and speckled Sussex, greeted her approach with flutters and clucking, their small eyes fixed on her expectantly. Esmeralda's scattered feed, watching them scramble and peck. A humble chore, vastly different from the lottery house's soul-crushing routine, yet felt liberating. The garden, though overrun with weeds, hosted a few determined tomato plants, their nascent fruits hinting at an eventual bounty. Kneeling, she attacked the weeds with newfound resolve, the dark soil staining her fingertips. A modest beginning, a concrete step in building this unusual new existence. By mid-morning, a rumbling in her stomach announced its presence. Dusty was out, a lone figure on horseback inspecting the fences against the immense horizon. She ventured into the main house, the silence amplifying her unease. The kitchen, ample in size, felt sterile, untouched. Copper pots, dulled with tarnish, hung above the stove, and the pantry held meager provisions: flour, sugar, dried beans, smoked bacon, the bare necessities. An idea sparked to life. She recalled her grandmother's skills, how she could conjure deliciousness from the most basic ingredients. A wave of confidence buoyed her as she set to work. The beans went into a soak, onions and carrots were diced, and the bacon crisped in a heavy cast-iron pot. Savory aromas soon permeated the air, vanquishing the heavy scent of dust and stagnation. Humming a forgotten tune from her childhood, Esmeralda added water. Herbs gleaned from a drying jar, and allowed the mixture to simmer, flavors slowly intertwining. For biscuits, she worked flour, water, and lard into a simple dough, the rhythmic kneading soothing her anxieties. As dusk began to color the sky with vibrant streaks of orange and violet, Dusty returned. He tended to his horse, then headed toward the house, his shoulders heavy with fatigue. The tantalizing fragrance emanating from the kitchen arrested him. He paused, inhaling deeply, a glimmer of hope in his expression. Inside, Esmeralda was setting the table with mismatched tableware. A steaming pot of stew sat center stage, accompanied by a basket of golden brown biscuits. The warm glow of the kerosene lamp softened her features, granting her an almost ethereal beauty. "I hope it's all right," she stuttered, her face coloring. "I just thought, a warm meal." Dusty remained silent, his eyes glued to the food. Finally, he drew out a chair and settled in. He spooned a generous helping of stew into his bowl and tasted it tentatively. His eyes widened slightly. "This is—" He hesitated, searching for the right word. "Damn good." Esmeralda watched him eat, her heart pounding in her chest. He ate with deliberation, savoring each mouthful. The silence in the room had transformed, no longer hollow, but filled with the quiet satisfaction of communion. Eventually, he leaned back, a subtle smile playing on his lips. "My wife, Sarah, Used to make a bean stew similar to this, he said, his voice hushed. Not exactly the same, but it evokes her. Esmeralda's spirits dipped slightly. She was pleased he enjoyed the meal, but the comparison to his deceased wife served as a stark reminder of her standing, an interloper, filling a void. Dusty seemed to intuit her disquiet. It's different, though, he clarified, meeting her gaze. Yours has more vibrancy to it. Sarah's was comforting, like a worn quilt. Yours is like sunlight breaking through winter's gloom. He picked up a biscuit and tore off a piece, dunking it into the stew. Thank you, Esmeralda, he said, his tone sincere. This house hasn't felt this alive in ages. Esmeralda managed a small smile, a wave of relief washing over her. It wasn't affection, not yet, but it was a beginning. It was a connection, forged over a humble supper, a shared spark of warmth in a desolate world. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could find her place here, a purpose beyond being another unwanted woman. Perhaps, in this unexpected sanctuary, she could truly begin to mend. Whispers and judgments. The bubbling pot of beans, its savory scent filling the ranch house, fought a losing battle against the acrid taste of dread in Esmeralda's mouth. Her trip to Harmony Creek for provisions, flour, sugar, coffee, intended as proof of her value to Dusty, had soured. The town, normally a picture of tranquil stillness beneath the sun, crackled with an unsettling current, all aimed squarely at her. It began with fleeting, sharp glances as she passed the mercantile. Then came the murmurs, low and insidious, like dust devils swirling in the dry earth. She feigned deafness, clutching her shopping list, its paper a testament to her rising anxiety. Stacking canned peaches in her basket, she couldn't help but eavesdrop. That lottery bride, she caught from a cluster of women fingering fabrics. Actually living at the River's place, at the feed cooperative, a pair of men snickered. Dusty must be desperate, or just plain blind. Heat flushed Esmeralda's face. Paying for chicken feed felt like being branded in public. The nadir arrived outside Maggie's, where Martha May, a woman whose words could draw blood, held court on an upended crate, her voice resonating like a cracked bell. Well, if it isn't the latest Mrs. Rivers, or should we just call you the ornament? A wave of laughter rippled through the small gathering. Esmeralda froze, her breath hitched. Martha May's eyes, like obsidian beads, gleamed with spite. I hear you're quite the cook. Guess Dusty thinks he can fatten you up for the hard months. Esmeralda's grip on the basket handles tightened until her knuckles shone. She yearned to vanish, to seep into the parched dirt and disappear entirely. The laughter intensified, a cruel symphony that reverberated in her skull. She stumbled, nearly losing her purchase on the heavy sack. Tears blurred her vision, twisting the jeering faces into grotesque masks. She had envisioned a clean slate, a sanctuary where she could finally feel secure. Yet Harmony Creek seemed determined to chain her to her past, to her perceived lack of merit. Pivoting sharply, she sprinted down the main street, abandoning the rest of her errands. She didn't cease running until she reached the edge of town, the taunting echoes receding behind her. The burden of unspoken accusations bore down on her, stifling all hope. Dusty discovered her by the stream, a solitary, curled figure amidst the swaying grass. He'd seen her rushing past, the discarded groceries strewn near the feed store, and a cold, unwelcome anger had seized him. Kneeling, he offered a kerchief. Esmeralda? What happened out there? She shook her head, unable to articulate the hurt, tears coursing down her cheeks. Dusty waited, his presence a silent anchor. At last, between gasps, she confessed, her voice trembling with humiliation and sorrow. They said such awful things. His jaw hardened. He was familiar with this town, its narrow views, and its addiction to gossip. He simply hadn't anticipated the poison being directed at Esmeralda. Rising, his shadow enveloped her protectively. Stay put, he instructed, his tone low with suppressed rage. I'll be right back. He found Martha May still holding vigil in front of the diner, her laughter lingering in the air. The throng parted as he advanced, their smiles faltering beneath his unwavering glare. "Martha May," he stated, his voice deceptively calm but carrying the threat of a storm. "A word with you." She smirked, though her eyes revealed a trace of disquiet. "Dusty, what brings you to my humble doorstep?" "I heard what was said regarding Esmeralda," he replied, his gaze unwavering, "and I won't stand for it. She's a guest under my roof and deserves common decency. A concept, I suspect, foreign to you." Martha May's expression turned severe. "She's a lottery bride, Dusty. Folks know what that entails." "What it entails," Dusty corrected, his voice gaining volume, "is that she was in a dire situation, and I extended a hand. That grants neither you nor anyone else the privilege to judge her, or to peddle falsehoods." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the onlookers. "Esmeralda is a good-hearted woman, and any who suggest otherwise will have me to answer to." He spun on his heel and strode away, leaving a palpable silence in his wake. The mirth had vanished, replaced by the restless shuffle of feet. Back at the creek, Esmeralda saw him returning, her pulse quickening. His face was set, but a quiet resolve shone in his gaze, offering a glimmer of reassurance. Later that evening, Cal Johnson visited the ranch, ostensibly to assess Dusty's herd. Yet Esmeralda recognized the concern etched on his features as he clapped Dusty on the shoulder. "Heard some unpleasantness in town today, Dusty," Cal remarked, his voice subdued. "People are talking." Dusty sighed heavily. "Let them talk, Cal. They'll soon find another bone to pick." Cal squeezed his shoulder again. "Just wanted you to know, I'm in your corner. Always have been. Besides," he added with a knowing wink, "maybe this will finally give those hens in Harmony Creek something more interesting to chatter about than my confirmed bachelorhood." Esmeralda observed them from the window, a nascent warmth blossoming in her chest. Perhaps, against all odds, she wasn't utterly isolated in this unfamiliar land. Yet the poison of Harmony Creek's whispers still reverberated in her mind, a constant reminder of the trials that lay ahead. The storm. The wind shrieked, a tormented spirit battering the ranch house. Rain hammered the windows, turning the world outside into a blurred, chaotic mess. A thunderclap, sharp and brutal, detonated overhead, vibrating through the floorboards. Esmeralda flinched, her grip tightening on the cool countertop. Dusty entered, his expression a flinty mask, shrugging into his yellow slicker. "That squall's barreling right for us. And she's mean." He snatched his hat from the hook by the door. "Cattle need higher ground. Lightning's going to be a killer." Esmeralda's pulse quickened, a frantic drum against her ribs. The tempest felt like an externalization of the chaos within her. "Is there anything I can do?" Dusty hesitated, weighing the risks. He knew the danger, the capricious nature of such a brutal downpour. Yet, he couldn't ignore the genuine worry etched in her features. "Ever ride?" She paused. "A little. It's been a while." The truth was her last ride was in childhood, helping her father coax life from their small farm. The memory, hazy with time, felt fragile. "All right," Dusty decided, his voice resolute. "Saddle the mare. Gentle soul. Stay close, got it? And follow every order." Esmeralda nodded, a jolt of adrenaline sharpening her senses. She hurried toward the barn, wind tearing at her hair. The mare, a gentle bay, seemed unfazed by the growing uproar. Esmeralda fumbled with the saddle, her fingers stiff with cold. Dusty materialized beside her, his presence a grounding force against the storm's fury. With practiced ease, he adjusted the straps, his touch swift and sure. They ventured out into the tempest's heart, raindrops like icy splinters against their skin. The wind mauled them, threatening to unseat them. The cattle, normally placid, were agitated and restless, milling in the lower fields. Brief, stark flashes of lightning revealed panic swimming in their eyes. "Drive him toward the ridge." Dusty bellowed above the rising gale. "Keep him moving." Esmeralda, clutching the reins, struggled to obey. She urged the mare onward, her voice shaky as she called to the herd. The ground was treacherous with mud, each step precarious. Several times, the mare faltered, and Esmeralda clutched the saddle horn, her knuckles bone-white. A particularly violent thunder burst unleashed a wave of panic through the herd. They broke, scattering in every direction. Dusty cursed, his voice tight with frustration. "Damn it all! We've got to gather them." He spurred his horse after a knot of cattle heading for the creek, the surging waters a furious torrent. Esmeralda watched him go, her breath catching in her throat. She knew the creek's treacherous nature in this deluge. She noticed a handful of calves, separated from their mothers, huddled near a copse of trees. They shivered, bleating pitifully, their eyes wide with fright. Ignoring the wind's icy bite and the relentless downpour, Esmeralda steered towards them, her tones soft and calming. "Easy now, little ones," she coaxed, gently guiding them forward. "It's all right. Follow me." Tentatively, the calves began to move, responding to the soothing cadence of her voice. Esmeralda guided them toward the main body of the herd, her own fear receding under a wave of protective resolve. As she rejoined Dusty, his expression held a mix of surprise and admiration. "You okay?" Esmeralda nodded, her cheeks flushed with exertion and the chill. The calves, they were afraid. Dusty's gaze softened. He saw beyond the woman thrust into a lottery marriage. He saw resilience, empathy, and a depth he hadn't suspected. They continued to work in tandem, wrestling with the storm and the spook cattle. Finally, after what stretched into an eternity, they shepherded the animals to the relative shelter of the ridge. Drained and drenched, they turned their horses toward the ranch house. On their return, lightning seared a nearby tree, sending shards of wood exploding outwards. Esmeralda cried out, instinctively shielding her face. The mare reared, unseating Esmeralda in a jarring fall. Dusty acted without thought, dismounting and rushing to her side. "Esmeralda, are you hurt?" She lay in the mire, disoriented and trembling. I think so. My ankle." Dusty carefully assessed her ankle. "Looks like a sprain. Can you stand?" Esmeralda attempted to rise, but a jolt of agony shot up her leg. She gasped and collapsed back into the mud. Dusty scooped her into his arms, his face a mask of concern. "Hold tight," he muttered, his voice strained. He carried her the remaining distance to the ranch house, his muscles screaming with the effort. The storm still raged, but inside, a fire snapped merrily in the hearth, casting a honeyed glow across their weary faces. Esmeralda, cocooned in a thick blanket, watched Dusty minister to her ankle. The tempest continued to howl, but within the confines of the ranch house, a delicate tranquility began to bloom. A confession of the heart. The morning after dawned clear and crisp, the air scrubbed clean by the storm. Sunlight, sharp and unforgiving, revealed the extent of the damage. Fences lay splintered, fields were submerged in muddy pools, and the river, usually a gentle trickle, roared like a wounded beast. Dusty helped Esmeralda hobble onto the porch. Her ankle was swollen and bruised, a painful reminder of their frantic scramble the day before. "Stay put," he instructed, his voice gruff with concern. "I need to assess the livestock." Esmeralda watched him go, her heart a tight knot in her chest. The events of yesterday replayed in her mind, the terror of the storm, the frantic energy of moving the cattle, and most vividly, the feel of Dusty's strong arms carrying her back to the ranch. She felt safe, impossibly safe, in his embrace. He returned an hour later, his face etched with weariness. "Lost a few head," he said, running a hand through his damp hair. "But not as many as I feared. We'll rebuild the fences. It'll take time." He sat beside her on the porch swing, the silence stretching between them, thick with unspoken words. A robin landed on the porch railing, chirping insistently. Esmeralda focused on the bird, anything to avoid Dusty's gaze. "Esmeralda," he began, his voice low and hesitant. "I need to say something. Something I should have said a long time ago." She finally looked at him, her breath catching in her throat. His eyes, usually so guarded, were filled with an unsettling vulnerability. I, I admire you, Esmeralda, he confessed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. More than I can say. Before, at the lottery, I thought I was doing you a favor, giving you a home. But yesterday I saw something else. I saw your courage, your kindness, the way you cared for those calves like they were your own. You risked everything, Esmeralda, for creatures that couldn't help you in return. That takes a special kind of heart. He turned to face her, his expression raw and earnest. I've been a lonely man for a long time, Esmeralda, and I never thought I'd find someone like you. Someone who could bring light back into my life. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gently enveloping hers. Esmeralda, I think I'm falling in love with you. Esmeralda's heart hammered against her ribs. The confession hung in the air, fragile and beautiful, like a butterfly just emerged from its chrysalis. She searched his eyes, looking for any sign of deception, any hint of pity. But all she saw was honesty, a profound and tender vulnerability. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring his features. Dusty, she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. He squeezed her hand. You don't have to say anything. Just tell me if there's any chance you feel something too. She looked down at their joined hands, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Fear, doubt, and a flicker of something dangerous, hope. She had come to the ranch seeking refuge, a place to hide from the whispers and the judgment. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford, a risk she couldn't take. Or so she thought. But then she remembered the warmth of his gaze, the gentle curve of his smile, the way he had treated her with respect and kindness, even when she felt unworthy. She remembered the strength in his arms as he carried her to safety, the concern etched on his face as he tended to her injury. And she realized, with a shock that stole her breath away, that she had already fallen. Fallen hard. She lifted her head, meeting his gaze. The sunlight caught in her tears, turning them into shimmering diamonds. Yes, Dusty, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. There's a chance. I think I'm falling in love with you too. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features. He cupped her cheek with his hand, his thumb gently stroking her skin. Esmeralda, he murmured, his voice husky with emotion. You've given me a reason to believe in second chances. He leaned closer, his eyes searching hers, seeking permission. She closed her eyes and nodded, her heart soaring with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. His lips met hers in a gentle, tentative kiss. It was a kiss of hope, of healing, of unspoken promises. A kiss that tasted of rain and sunshine, of second chances and the quiet strength of a love born in the heart of storm. When they finally broke apart, Esmeralda felt a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The fear and doubt hadn't completely vanished, but they were overshadowed by a burgeoning sense of hope, a fragile belief that maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a place where she belonged. Love conquers all. The scent of pine and wildflowers swirled in the air, a fragrant benediction on the small gathering assembled beneath the sprawling oak tree. Esmeralda, radiant in a simple cream-colored dress Dusty had insisted on buying her, felt a tremor of disbelief run through her. Today, she, Esmeralda Flores, was marrying Dusty Rivers. She smoothed the soft fabric, her fingers tracing the delicate lace at the neckline. It was a far cry from the rough-spun fabrics she'd grown accustomed to, a symbol of the new life she was building, brick by painstaking brick, with Dusty. He stood at the makeshift altar, fashioned from a weathered wagon wheel draped with wildflowers, his gaze fixed on her. His eyes, usually the color of a stormy sky, were softened with an emotion she couldn't quite name, but felt deep within her own heart. Love. It resonated, pure and undeniable. Cal, standing beside Dusty as best man, winked at her, a mischievous glint in his eyes. He'd been a constant source of support, his easy humor a balm to her anxieties. Even now, she could hear him muttering something under his breath to Dusty, probably a good-natured ribbing about finally tying the knot. As she walked towards Dusty, escorted by the kindest neighbor she had met since coming to town, Mrs. Henderson, she saw Martha May lurking at the edge of the crowd, her face a mask of disapproval. Esmeralda straightened her shoulders, refusing to let the woman's venomous gaze dim her joy. This day was about her and Dusty, about the love they had found in the most unexpected of circumstances. The ceremony was short and sweet, officiated by the town's circuit preacher, a man with a booming voice and a gentle heart. When it came time for Dusty to say his vows, he looked directly into Esmeralda's eyes, his voice thick with emotion. "Esmeralda," he said, "you came into my life like a sunrise after a long, dark night. You've brought laughter back into this house, warmth back into my heart. I promise to love you, cherish you, and honor you for all the days of my life." Tears welled in Esmeralda's eyes. She had prepared her own vows, carefully crafted words that expressed the depth of her feelings for this man who had seen past her flaws, past the whispers and the judgments, and loved her for who she truly was. "Dusty," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I came here with nothing but fear and uncertainty. You offered me kindness, respect, and a safe haven. You showed me what it means to be loved, truly loved. I promise to be your partner, your confidant, your best friend, and to stand by your side through whatever life throws our way." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, a cheer erupted from the small crowd. Dusty pulled Esmeralda into his arms, his kiss a promise of forever. The reception was held in the barn, transformed with twinkling lanterns and garlands of wildflowers. The air buzzed with laughter and conversation. Cal, true to form, had rigged up a makeshift sound system and was playing lively fiddle music. Dusty led Esmeralda onto the dance floor. As they swayed to the music, lost in each other's arms, she felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. He whispered in her ear, "See, I told you we'd prove them wrong." She smiled, leaning her head against his chest. "We did, didn't we?" Later, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ranch, Dusty and Esmeralda sat on the porch, sipping lemonade. The air was still and quiet, broken only by the chirping of crickets. "Happy?" Dusty asked, his arm draped around her shoulders. Esmeralda looked at him, her heart overflowing with love. "More than I ever thought possible." He pulled her closer, kissing her forehead. "Me too, Esme. Me too." The following days settled into a comfortable rhythm. Esmeralda continued to tend the garden, her hands finding solace in the rich soil. Dusty worked the ranch, his movements infused with a newfound energy. They cooked together, laughed together, and built a life filled with simple joys. One evening, as they were preparing dinner, Esmeralda decided to try her hand at a complicated mole sauce, a dish her abuela used to make for special occasions. The kitchen filled with the aroma of chilies, spices, and chocolate. Dusty watched her, a smile playing on his lips. "Smells amazing, Esme. But are you sure you know what you're doing?" She laughed. "Trust me, vaquero. This is going to be the best mole you've ever tasted." Hours later, as they sat down to enjoy the feast, Dusty's eyes widened. "Esme, this is incredible. You're a miracle worker." She beamed with pride. "My abuela would be proud." They spent the rest of the evening reminiscing about their families, sharing stories and memories. It was moments like these, quiet and intimate, that cemented their bond, weaving their lives together into a tapestry of love and understanding. As the years passed, the whispers faded, replaced by admiration and respect. The townspeople, initially skeptical, came to see Esmeralda not as a lottery bride, but as a valued member of the community. Martha May, though never truly accepting, eventually learned to hold her tongue, silenced by the undeniable happiness that radiated from the Rivers Ranch. Dusty and Esmeralda built a life filled with love, laughter, and the comforting aroma of simmering spices. They had found solace in each other's arms, proving that love, indeed, conquers all.